Hello, I am Nimi, Assistant Professor in the Department of Biotechnology, Nehru Arts and Science College. Today we shall see a topic on the concepts of an ecosystem in the course Environmental Studies. So our presentation will help us understand the basic terms to understand our environment better. We shall also see the different types of ecosystem, its structure, its various components, and how different organisms play a very important role in the ecosystem. Therefore, ecology encompasses and helps us to understand how the organisms interact with each other and with their environment. They help us to understand, for example, a prey-predator relationship, a relationship between the plants and their environment, how plants utilize sunlight for their energy and to prepare their own food, or how animals adapt to a particular environment. What is ecology? So, ecology is the broad scientific study of the interaction between the organisms and their environment, which includes both the biotic as well as the abiotic factors. So, biotic factors, which include all the living factors, whereas the abiotic factors include the non-living environment. There are a group of people who study the interaction at various levels of organization, at the levels of population, communities, and even biosphere. So, such a group of people are known as ecologists. Ecosystems can also be classified based on their origin into two major categories, that is, natural and artificial ecosystems. Natural ecosystems are those self-regulating systems where human interference is nil and it exists in nature as forests, grasslands, deserts, oceans, rivers, etc. Whereas artificial systems are those systems where you can see that they have been created by man. Examples are aquarium, croplands, can be the villages and cities and communities that is found around us. An ecosystem can be thoroughly understood with respect to its structure and functional relationship of an organism with its environment. Therefore, the structure and function will help us understand the relationship between the biotic and the abiotic components that is seen in a particular ecosystem. So therefore, the structure of an ecosystem consists of two major components, the biotic components and the non-biotic components. The biotic components include all the living organisms, example, plants, animals, microorganisms such as bacteria, viruses, fungi, etc. These living organisms interact with their abiotic factors for their survival. There are three major categories of biotic components such as the producers, the decomposers and the consumers. So what are producers? So producers are those biotic components which are capable of synthesizing their own energy. They are capable of creating their own energy. They are also called as self-feeders. They tend to provide energy for the other organisms. They do not themselves consume other organisms. And also that these organisms can be classified into two types, a category where you find that they can synthesize their own food capturing the sun's light, for example the plants and the algae. There is another category which can capture the chemicals and convert them into useful energy. And these, now let us see the consumers. The consumers are otherwise called as heterotrophs, meaning they depend on other organisms for their food and energy. They are incapable of preparing their food. Consumers can be broadly classified into primary consumers, secondary consumers and tertiary consumers. Herbivores are those consumers which directly depend on their plants for the food and energy. They are also called as plant eaters. We can quote so many examples from nature. Here we can see few of the examples that you can name for yourself. Next classification of consumers are the secondary consumers. The secondary consumers are dependent upon the primary consumers for their food. They are also called as primary carnivores. Here we can see few of the examples of the primary carnivores which are dependent upon the small animals for their energy. The next level of consumers are called as the tertiary consumers. They are otherwise called as the secondary carnivores. These secondary carnivores are seen to feed on the primary carnivores for their food. Examples of the secondary carnivores are seen in the slide. Examples such as the eagle feeding on the deer, the lion chasing a wild beast for its food, the snake feeding on a frog. Decomposers. Decomposers are the next level of organisms that you find in an ecosystem, and these group of organisms entirely depend upon the dead bodies and decay them or decompose them into simple molecules. They release these simple molecules in the form of nutrients such as calcium, phosphorus, nitrogen, etc. back to the soil where the producers can utilize them and can synthesize their own food. So, therefore, decomposers play a very important role in the ecosystem. They help in recycling of the nutrients back to the environment, making it available for the green plants to synthesize their own food. Decomposers also help in balancing the ecosystem in a way where the cycling of nutrients happens between the organisms and the environment. So the decomposers are formed of two major groups, the detritivores or the detritus feeders and the scavengers. The detritus feeders are those which depend on the smaller portions of the dead organisms and which can break down them into smaller particles and smaller molecules, whereas the scavengers depend on the larger portions of the dead remains of the organisms, in turn capable of decomposing them into smaller molecules. However, these are the decomposers which help in the recycling of nutrients back to the environment, and they include vultures, insects, crabs, and several other examples that you can see in the slide.